We're going to start. It's going to be pretty simple. So the three of us are going to share what is the most difficult for us when it comes to learning new things and how we overcome that. So we have very different perspectives on that stuff. So Brian's very good with the neuroscience behind it, the mental models and that kind of stuff. For me, I'm about a lot of action, a whole lot of action. And some planning beforehand. And Errol comes from a teaching background, so he's used to both formal education in terms of what works and what doesn't work. So I think this is going to be interesting. So I'm going to start with what I find the most difficult when learning new skills. So I've been learning 3 new skills a month for 2 years now, a bit over 2 years. I did skip a few times, but overall I learned about 66 skills within that time frame. Some of them I didn't reach the level I wanted to reach, but overall it went quite all right. So at least 40 of them I was satisfied. And the main difficulty that I still have even now is it's still finding the right resources for me, for my proficiency level. So every time I set out to learn a new skill, I don't just search best way to learn skill X, best way to learn the guitar. The problem with that is that I don't know. Like if I've never played guitar before and someone's showing me the best chords to play, I don't even know how to strum, right? So trying to figure out which resources are applicable to me on the moment. I still have to experiment after all this time. I set a list of probably 20 resources. I go through them and I go quickly now. But sometimes you go through these resources and you think, because you can't do it, it's your fault. You're not smart enough. People said it's the best video ever on learning how to play the guitar. But if I don't know how to strum, it's completely useless to me. So a lot of people don't accept that the fault is not theirs. The fault is it's just not the right material for their proficiency level at the moment. And that's still a problem for me. Trying to pinpoint directly what is going to be useful to me. And obviously, if someone solved this, I'd be really happy to hear about it. I think most people are struggling with that to some degree. But yeah, so that's it for me. Brian?
Cool. Yeah, my head's flying in different directions here. I know I said I was going to talk about writing, but that is something that, like, I'm a writer at heart. I'm just finishing the touches on my first book now at the moment. Nice. But and one thing, I'll just go closely into that at the minute. So I'd be at a pretty proficient level at writing at the moment, but really the skill I'm struggling to get at the moment is really taking my writing into the perspective of others. And literally, with every sentence I write, to be thinking about, and not always about others, but the purpose of that sentence. What's the motivation behind that sentence? What's the reason? Is it redundant? Should it be there? What is it actually doing? And that's something that I'm struggling with at the moment. And I suppose it's a time thing for me because I haven't got the time to look at every individual sentence and put that in. But that's a skill I'm looking to develop at the moment. And it comes back down to what I want to come back to here, which I just thought about as you were talking about it, and we were talking about mental models, is a meta skill of putting. You want to learn a skill, but it's putting it into action, putting the things into action that you want to actually learn. Like we talked about mental models earlier on first principle thinking, and it just struck me there, Danny, that what you were talking about there was strumming the guitar. That's first principle thinking, breaking it down to the basics. Mm-hmm. Right now, if I implement first principle thinking and mental models, which I also have a problem of remembering to implement in the moment, if I wanted to implement that in terms of my writing, when am I actually going to do it? That's really the skill. So it's a meta skill of implementing what I know I need to do, but I'm not doing it because I haven't got the time. Does that make sense?
So much. That's actually a part that I wanted to touch on when it comes to methods for learning, actually. So
yeah, I went very meta there.
Yeah, I love it. So yeah, we're going to jump with Ariel, and then we're going to jump into the methods that we use.
So what I find most challenging is, and this relates to what Brian said in terms of the audience. So if it's a skill that's just I'm learning for myself, such as gardening or a new type of pedagogical technique that's more in my wheelhouse, I'm more comfortable with that. If it's a brand new skill that's going to impact others, like for example, learning how to code, or being able to create a video for marketing purposes, there is a lot of, I guess we would call it anxiety, confusion, unknown, that makes me forget about just get it done versus making it perfect. And it takes me a while to understand that the actual process is the learning piece, and that's okay. That it's not going to have to be perfect. That because I goof up on a video doesn't mean that my branding is any of a less value. People aren't going to hop on that like they are right now with Peloton's branding of the recent ad that came out over Thanksgiving.
What happened?
So, Peloton, which
the
is
bikes.
The bikes, right? So they put out this ad of basically a fit woman whose husband got her a Peloton, and she was excited about it. And they're running through like basically a year of her using it. The problem that some people are having is, number one, there's I guess a theory of sexism that why did the husband buy the wife a bike, to exercise, implicating that she's not, of a body image, which I don't necessarily see that. But the other piece of, there's this woman who's saying, that there was no transformation. She didn't look any different at the end. So, but the company is getting severe backlash for it to the point where the value of the stock has dropped 10%.
Oh shit!
Yeah, exactly.
Whoa. Yeah, for your business, actually making like goofy mistakes is actually might actually be a plus.
For sure.
Depending on type of business, that's actually interesting to see what how you can turn your mistakes into actually something that's beneficial to you.
For sure.
And guys in the chat, if you want to write down what are your own problems with learning new skills, we can completely address that as well. And we're going to open up the floor probably in 15 minutes where you're going to be able to join us. And so talk about your problems, talk about your solutions, ask a question to one of us. And so, yeah, that's going to be in around 15 minutes. All right, I guess I'm going to jump on meta learning since you jumped on this. I don't know if you guys read this book here, Ultra Learning.
I haven't.
All right, so it's Scott Young. He's a very interesting guy. He did experiments similar to me, but at a different level. So he did a computer science degree in a year on his own. So he studied on the side using, I think it was the MIT's material, but without ever going to class or signing up for class or any of that stuff. And you would get the exams from other students, and you would do it and get rated and stuff. So he completed all the material in only a year instead of 4. He was trying to showcase that it's actually possible to learn without actually going to school. So interesting stuff in there. And my favorite chapter in there, and something I apply all the time, he talks about meta learning. And so when I start to learn new skills, I do act really quickly. I do jump to action very fast. But I do still spend about 8 hours planning what it's going to be for me for learning any new skill. And his suggestion is, he calls it the 10% rule. So if you have 30 hours for the month to spend learning the skill, you should spend at least 3 hours figuring out what material you're going to use and answering these questions. So why do you want to learn this? And I failed at quite a few skills that I tried because my why just wasn't completely there. So I tried to learn to play the ukulele, and my why was, it seems fun. And I was in a period in my life where I didn't really have time to have that much fun or something. So I didn't follow through, or didn't reach the point I wanted to with ukulele because my why was not obvious. The second question is what. So what are you going to need to learn that skill? What material are you going to use? What are you going to do? Are you going to, how are you going to practice? No, the how is after. So how are you going to practice? How are you going to use the material you found during the what to make it, to learn it? But things he doesn't add in there that I think is actually really important is the where and the when. Where are you going to practice what you're going to practice? I know Ariel does boxing. Well, there's definitely a where component in there. He could box at home. It's definitely possible, but would he learn as much as going to the gym like he does? Probably not. The when, I'm sure you guys will agree with me, the when is so important. Deciding in advance what makes most sense for you to learn a skill. So for me, I do it in the morning. For most of them, it's always in the morning because I get all of the energy from waking up and having good sleep. So, and that's where I'm most productive as well. So for me, skill learning is actually the most important thing I do in my day, more important than my work. And so, yeah, I want to use the best where I got the most energy. So for me, I do that in the morning, but some people are evening people or night people, and that's completely fine. So mental learning for me has been instrumental. When I don't do it, any of these parts, I tend to not follow through. So I recommend everyone to follow the 10% rule that Scott's talking about. If 10% doesn't work for you for the first time, try 20%, try 5%. It's all about experimentation. And other reasons why I failed in the past is when I don't track my progress. Like as much as it seems like it constrains you and like you have to think about that. I don't know. Every time I try not to track it, I didn't follow through. It's really that simple. I know a lot of people don't track their progress. And when people go to school, they kind of track it for you. So even though you're not motivated to do it, you're going to do it. You have to. You have to. They track it for you. So as much as I hate the school system, this is a thing that actually works. Yeah. So the other thing that, so if I don't find it useful, if I can't answer my why, if I can't properly answer my what, my how, and all these things, then I think it's critical to do that to succeed.
Yeah, I think I'd love to jump in there, Danny. I'll just build in on top of what you were talking about. And a couple of things jumped out. The first thing that jumps out with me, I don't think I should necessarily go into mental models today. It'd be probably too long to go into a big spiel on mental models. But back to first principle thinking. Like back to first principle thinking is basically breaking down statements to their most logical assumptions, like looking at the core elements. Like with a battery, you don't say how much is a battery, you'd say how much is the cobalt, how much is the nickel. That's breaking it down to its most basic components. And for me, what you're talking about there, when and the why, or the where, the when and the where, they're first principles. Like, where are you going to do it? Have you got somewhere to learn the skill? If you haven't got that, what's the point? Mm-hmm. If you don't know when to do it, it's another thing as well. And I think in terms of mental models and really where all this clicks in, like reinforcement learning or associative learning, Pavlovian conditioning, whatever you call it, like they're principles of psychology as well, but they're really they're mental models as well. They're a way of explaining the world, and they're only one part of a way of explaining the world. And for me, really, it comes down to you saying about the skills. There's some skills that you fail at. Like we were talking about this before we went on air, that the scientific explanation of liking from a behavioral reinforcement perspective is reinforcement is rewarded. If you are rewarded by something, the behavior will increase. Therefore, you've got to like something and be rewarded by it to continue doing it. So you should probably nearly give up. Like and that's your why in a nutshell there. So if you're not being rewarded by it, you're not being reinforced, and in layman terms you don't like it, your why isn't strong enough. So you might as well try something else. I think that's really good. It's a good feeling kind of a thing. And
how do you increase that reward or get that reward?
get that reward. Right?
Some of the skills are have such a steep learning curve to start with, that getting the reward might not be obvious, like playing the guitar, for example. Before you actually play a song, you'll probably need 20, 30 hours of practice.
Yeah, from a behavioral analytical perspective, like in psychology, we call what's this called, you set up a motivating operation. So you make like, let's say from a very basic perspective, if somebody was starving, food would be a bigger reinforcer than if you were starving. Like, so if we make the reward even better. So let's say if you're learning to play the ukulele, like it doesn't matter what the reward is, whatever behavior comes before the reward, you're more likely to increase that behavior in the future. Like, so as simply as eating a jelly bean after you do a little session on the ukulele would make that more rewarding if you like jelly beans.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, and it's funny. I was talking about it earlier today. Then I wrote a blog or a little post about it today. It's called the Premack Principle. So the Premack Principle in behavioral psychology is basically rewarding unfavorable behavior with more favorable behavior. The great way of explaining this is like your granny or your mom getting you to eat vegetables. So I'll give you a dessert if you eat your veg. So you're rewarding eating vegetables with dessert. And you can do that with any behavior in psychology. This is what's used with kids with autism and kids with learning disabilities. You really reward that behavior. So I think, and that's a good way of doing that, and a great way to do it, which really segues onto what you were saying as well, is track the behavior. If you track it, the tracking in itself is a reward. You can see progress. That's a reward. So
you said track behavior. I do both behavior and result. Which do you think is more important?
Well, the result for me is sort of, the result is the concept from a behavior. I'm sort of thinking in behavioral lines here. So the behavior would be the action, playing the ukulele. Like, so if, let's say, there'd be internal motivations there, internal rewards, you're getting better. So that's an outcome, that's a result, but it's also a consequence as well. It's the reward. So it's part and parcel of that as well. So, and you could increase in many ways. You could, let's say, overemphasize how well you're doing. You could track that behavior. You could eat the jelly bean. There's loads of little things you could do to reinforce that behavior. And we tend to think in mental terms, like in our head, but really if you really want to change behavior and you really want to learn, it's environmental stuff. So change the environment and your behavior will naturally change. And that could be a good way of going there. And I know we're going to be talking about mental models today. I was going to be, but that's a mental model in itself, as a way of looking at reinforcement and a way of looking at conditioning as well. I just think that it's into the mental learning there. I'd love to get your take on it as well, Ariel, from the educational perspective there.
Sure. So the Premack Principle is actually something that's taught in special education, and also more recently in the past 5-10 years in regular education, at least in the United States.
Wow.
Yeah, where, as you said, eat your vegetables, you get dessert. Do your work, and you can go play, or you can get 5 minutes of extra recess. The difficulty that some teachers have, or even some schools have, is that you're doing extrinsic rewarding for something that we should be internalizing. And the truth of the matter is that you can't really internalize it with those types of higher order processes. You can with food, right? If you're hungry, you're going to want to eat. So you got to set the table in order to eat, right? But doing a worksheet or memorizing a set of mathematical facts, there's no intrinsic reward in that because you don't need to. So saying, okay, if you memorize those facts and then you can, play on the computer for 5 minutes, the reward itself is actually more enticing, and the kid will do it. Most kids will do it, but they won't understand the value of it. And that's where the struggle comes into play. And so that's where, because there's also this a minority view that the Premack Principle is actually a form of bribery. And it's not, because bribery means you're doing something illegal. You're not doing anything illegal. You're not asking the kid to do anything illegal. You're just giving them a reward, just like you do a paycheck, right? A paycheck is the same thing. Do your work, you get a check.
It's not the right motivation to do things.
Exactly.
Or learn.
Yeah.
But so understand giving ownership to the students, where fine, don't learn the multiplication facts, but come up with a jingle or this is why it's important to know the multiplication facts, not because you're going to be asked about it, but because it shows you how to find patterns, or it shows you the ability to, even for music or for coding, whatever it is, connect it to something that they're interested in. So that way, okay, this is why it's good to know it, because that'll help me. I can then apply it to the thing that I want to learn. And that's when it becomes intrinsic.
Does it work? Is there a why that can be applied to many people, or why your why has to be individual? Because I'm thinking, for example, my why for learning ukulele is probably different from Brian's why for learning ukulele. So how does that work in like a group setting where everyone has different whys?
I think you touched on it there, Ariel. There, it's like the values. The values piece is key. The values determines your internal motivations, and that in part determines your why. Really.
Yeah, I think that the fear that teachers have is, if you start to ask the kids why, what are you interested in, then it requires the teachers to do more work in the beginning. To okay, you want to learn cooking, fine. You want to do law enforcement, great. You want to learn science, you want to study science fiction, great. Those are your whys. With any topic, you can connect the concepts and skills that are being taught in a regular classroom. With any topic, it just takes a mind shift that teachers are afraid to do, especially in the States, because of the standardized testing. Because, I mean, to be honest, using the Premack Principle, they're not paid enough. They're really not. So you've got a very small percentage who are intrinsically motivated to do that because they believe that their why is to help the next generation who will serve. That's their, but it's a very small motivation. The rest are all doing it for other reasons, and so they don't have the motivation to do it, in my opinion.
Yeah, have we really jumped on unknowingly the essence of skill learning, like of the success of skill learning right there? It's nearly switching extrinsic motivations towards intrinsic motivations that are aligned with your values and aligned with your why. Once you line them up, it snowballs. The rest just looks after itself.
For sure.
Like, yeah, it's crazy. Like, it's sometimes finding out the why is secondary as well. It's funny. I'm trying to think why I'm so obsessed with mental models and why I'm so. It comes back to my own purpose. I want to show people that change is possible based on my own life experiences. I suppose that's where my purpose and my why comes. My why comes from there. But what's
could you explain your changing your life thing?
Yeah, no problem. So I was a heroin addict for 15 years. And I got clean 6 years ago. So I was an anxious mess, anxiety, panic attacks, nearly dead from addiction, afraid of the world. And for me, my why comes from, because I've just learned these tools that I know change is possible. And my purpose in life now is to show other people, especially young kids, that change is possible too. So that's my why. That's my mission in life, showing them the skills that I've used in my own life.
Especially the kids, like you mentioned it. Values are so important. Why are we not learning from a very young age to define our values? And or not to define them, but learn how to do it so that you can do it every year or every, I don't know.
And the maddest thing is, everybody I talk to, all adults, they all believe this. So every adult believes it and says it individually, but we're not doing it on a grander scale. You have the Navals of the world, all them top influencers, they're talking about it, but nobody's doing it. And it's back to it comes back to money. People aren't being paid enough to input these. You're going to have to scoop out the whole system to implement the new system. But it's such a big game. Teach kids about happiness, nutrition, meditation, self-awareness, value systems. Like, come on, like the gains there are astronomical to talk to, you know?
I don't think we need to replace the system, though. That's the thing. People think we need to to change the education system, or people think they need to change the education system, but in reality, you can do something completely different. It's like Henry Ford with the horses. People wanted to fight through horses. They're like, fuck it, I'm making cars.
Yeah, I love it. It's a great quote, isn't it? If people ask what they wanted to send a faster horse.
Yeah, that's completely how I feel about education. I was reading a book about it was about disrupting the education, and the guy was talking about, oh, here's how you do a better classroom. Here's how you better teach your teachers. No, this is not disruption. This is potentially evolution at best. But this is not disruption. Disruption will happen in something we don't anticipate, in a way we don't anticipate.
Yeah.
So I'm not competing with schools.
It's an evolution,
there's no point.
really, isn't it? Yeah. I love that. I love these conversations because you really don't know where they're gonna go. Like we're all talking about the same stuff from a different perspective that just all joined in. Like, you know, it's great.
Yeah.
It really is.
Did you finish your PhD in the end?
No, well, I am. So it's a 4-year PhD, and I'm 2 years. I have a year and a half left, actually. Year and a half. So I took. See, even though I was writing the book and I was doing the other things, it's a research PhD. So my main component of the PhD is a mindfulness intervention in the Rutland Centre. The Rutland Centre over in Ireland is like the Betty Ford of Ireland. It's like the top addiction clinic in Ireland. So we're running a mindfulness intervention for people in early recovery. But you'll like the analysis we're doing, Danny, because a lot of people usually look at, let's say, after the mindfulness intervention versus before it. So pre-post baseline tests comparisons.
What do they test on? Is that like, do you get an EGG and...
No, it would be, so we're doing behavioral psychological measures. So we like reaction time measures, psychological reaction time measures, and self-report measures as well. So it's very expensive getting into the EEG. You have to bring people into the lab, and it's messy. I'm not big on EEG either. I don't think it really measures anything, to be quite honest, except electrical signals near your skull. We won't go into it.
Really?
It's terrible. It's not a good science, Danny. It's supposed to be measuring neuronal activity. It's a great measure of it's a great temporal measure of brain activity, but it hasn't a clue where it's coming from in the brain. So they take brain wave scans and summations of certain areas, and they guess that that's what's to do with it. But it's very guesswork kind of stuff. But I think you'll love the analysis of my PhD. What we're looking at is it's a machine learning algorithm, and we're going to be looking at, it's like a cross-validation method. So we're going to take 90% of our participants, create a model, and then put 10% of the batch into the new model to test the specificity of the model. Mm-hmm. So what we want to see, instead of looking at differences, what has actually changed, we're going to look at what moves the needle. So if anxiety goes really low, we'll know, right, so it's better for people with high anxiety. Let's say, hypothetically speaking, it doesn't work for people with depression, but it works for anxiety and high impulsivity. So we'll be able to inform policy to say, this is what mindfulness interventions work for within this population. So it's never been done before, so it's quite exciting.
That's very
cool.
So
how can they act on that after?
Well, money. So they'll basically know. So let's say, hypothetically speaking, it really works for people with a combination of high anxiety and high impulsivity. Mm-hmm. We're doing measurements. Let's say a certain aspects of impulsivity. It's a very multifaceted measure. But so we could say, right, we'll get people early in recovery. We'll get them an assessment, just a self-report assessment. Oh, right there, and whoever is high in impulsivity and high in anxiety, they'll say, right, traditionally it works on these people. The research shows, so do it on them, don't do it on them. So it's really
self-report, though.
So
you don't know if it's necessarily true.
It's a predictor. Yeah, it's, in fairness, you can't get away from self-report, Danny. So we use a lot of behavioral measures in psychology, but they don't map onto real world behaviors. So there's a big huge. Lots of research at the moment are showing that all of these neuropsychological behavioral measures that are the gold standard just don't relate to what we thought they related to. So we're back to self-report, unfortunately. It's great if you can get cortisol levels, or you can get... I think psychology has gotten caught up so much in measure, that they've started to forgotten about what it is. It's psychology, the study of the psyche. It's not the study of bloody your reaction time to a dot on the screen, like, you know, which doesn't actually relate to anything. So I think we nearly have to bring it back. And it kills me to say this, but self-report is one of the better ways to go because of the funding at the moment. That's the biggest problem as well, is the funding is just not there. So it's sort of the line you have to go down, you know, you have to make do.
Yeah, the self-reporting thing is actually, that was our discussion from last time, because people in SkillUp Academy can self-report how good they are in skills, and the big issue is that we allow people to trade skills together, and you view other people's profile, and for example, 50% for me in driving a car is not the same thing for you. 50% driving a car for me, that means that, I don't know, I can drive in most cities, but probably not in India. And there's some techniques that I'm missing, like parallel parking, for example, or I don't know, going 150 miles per hour, or things like that. So self-reporting, I still struggle with that idea, actually.
Well, for me now, I'd only use self-reporting if it's validated. So like you'd really have to get into like the retest reliability, different types of validity. Is it valid? Is it measuring what it's actually measuring? Internal validity. Does every item on the scale measure the same thing? So for me, I would only use, if you ever are looking to use self-report measures, go to the one that the academic article that created the measure and check the validity, check the reliability, because self-reports are pretty much pointless unless they're high reliability and high validity. That's the key. And if you create your own scale, it's not going to work. Like you need valid and reliable scales. That's the big one with that, you know.
So with skill learning, is there such a thing as a universal scale, like the school system's trying to do, right? There's a grade system for every. It's the same grade system for every topic you take.
Yeah.
Does that one? We know it doesn't totally work in school, but can you do that in skill learning?
Well, there's enough so much for skill learning. There's lots of intelligence stuff and spatial learning and Pearson's stuff. I think that's the scales that use. So there's loads of stuff on the intelligence stuff, but for meta skills and all that kind of stuff, this is really new stuff. The science wouldn't go into that at the moment. The problem with developing scales is you need to get a sample like of 1,000, 2,000 people. It's a lot of money. If you do develop,
I've got that skill with SkillUp Academy. We could do that kind of research.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, and it's a lot of work. I tell you, I wouldn't be taking on creating a scale. It's a tough game.
Yeah,
I did semantic review one time, and I got into it, and I dipped my toe in, and it's a minefield.
Well, if you know anyone at your school who's interested.
Yeah, I'll keep it in mind.
What do you think, Ariel? Is there such a thing to grade skills?
Part of it is in terms of how you define it. So even the grading system now, the letter grade system, and it can be all objective in terms of, you know, a quiz score is worth 0.5% of the total grade, and you calculated all of that. The question is, what are the actual quote unquote assessments? What are they evaluating? So most of those are, you know, and I will say that except for tests, which typically just measure your ability to memorize and your ability to apply the information, there's so many other variables, especially that Brian was mentioning. Like if you're helping someone, if you have to submit a paper, chances are you're probably going to have somebody to review it, or you're going to use a tool like Grammarly, or you're going to there's going to be variables that won't necessarily measure your skill set. So what is the actual skill that you're measuring? Your ability to write? You know, so let's say it's at 80%. If you took away Grammarly, then it's down to 70%. So does that mean that you should improve your skill set to up to 80% individually, or are you going to use the tool to get you to 80%? So it's hard. I think, you know, a lot of it is perspective. I think it's also dependent on who the learner is and what the purpose is, what the goal is. So, Brian's doing research for his PhD for his own edification and his own personal growth, but the research itself is going to help millions potentially in that area. So, there's a lot riding on that. And what are the skills that he is learning that he can then teach others about with regard to this type of study? Learning to drive a car is a useful skill set. And I agree, your ability to drive a car, my ability to drive a car is different simply because of the way we would respond, even passing each other, right? If I cut you off versus you cut me off,
that won't happen. No, I don't drive fast.
He's in the car. Maybe he's meditating.
But I guess part of it is the learning of the skill, but then it's also what are you going to do with it, right? And I think that's almost the wow factor. That's kind of like how we put our influencers or our mentors on a pedestal, because they have the skills that we can learn. We can learn to be a good marketer. We can learn to be a good researcher. We can learn to be a good teacher. We look at our mentor, we put them up there because they're doing it. They're showcasing it. They're having the impact. And so that's what we strive for. In fact, that's how I would measure it. Like, how am I using my skills to the best of my ability to impact others, to reach the goal? That's how many people did you impact today?
Yeah, it's nice and measurable, isn't it?
That's
you can see that. You can see it. It's if you can see it quickly, you can measure it. And that's yeah. Right. I like that.
One thing I was doing for some of the skills was setting myself a challenge as soon as I started learning the skills. So what am I going to use it for at the end of the month, at the end of my learning period? So for example, for salsa dancing, it was, okay, I'm going to go to a club, I'm going to dance with random girls, and they're not going to be bored. They're going to have fun. And I'm not going to step on their feet. That's how I knew that I succeeded.
That's a great outcome, because if I went to a salsa club and danced on the floor, they'd run. That's the outcome. The outcome was keeping them on the floor with me.
Yeah. With drawing, one of the things I was doing was I opened a Pinterest account and I was putting my drawings there. One, it kept me accountable, and two, I could easily see the progress that I was doing. I wanted to perform for ukulele with a member of SkillUp Academy at the time. He was learning to play the drums, I think, and none of us actually reached the stage where it would have made sense for us to play together. But I like this idea of a challenge that's going to keep you accountable. So if you want to do public speaking, for example, well, you book in advance. You know nothing about public speaking, and you book a venue that you're going to be speaking at, and you have to do it. The accountability is just so extreme and so good.
Yeah, accountability is key, isn't it? It's nearly back to intrinsic, external motivations again, isn't it? It's crazy. Yeah, there's a funny thing that jumped out at me there, Danny, as well, is it's nearly the snowball effect of, I think Ariel mentioned it, like you think of the big influencers. There's nearly a tipping point, I think, tipping point, that was Gladwell, was it?
I have it behind me.
Yeah, there's nearly a tipping point.
I have it in Spanish, that's my skill. El punto clave.
What's that?
It's the tipping point.
It's no way.
Yeah, Malcolm, right there.
Excellent. He was over in Ireland last week, and I didn't even know it. Missed him. Cracking up. But it's nearly the tipping point of skill learning as well. Like for me, it was just, you mentioned public speaking there. Like my last 10 talks, I just started to notice, like, it's just like I'm calm, I walk out, anything can be thrown at me. It's just, there was a tipping point where all of a sudden it's crazy the way. I'd love to know at that level, when do you know that? When do you feel that skill is actually, it's there? The outcome is there, like, you know?
Yeah, I'm trying to think with writing. It just happened too quickly with writing. I can't. I mean, I got published after 5 days, which was completely a surprise for me. I was just waiting. I just wanted to improve my writing in English. So it was by accident.
You're not fluent. I keep forgetting that. That's crazy.
Yeah, but the real tipping point really happened when I released that article, the 3 most important skills to learn now to thrive in 2019. I used to think that with writing, the most I would ever make on Medium was $30 an article. That was where I was at the time, like 20, 30 bucks per article. And I thought, yeah, I'm it. And all of a sudden, I decided to not write every day, to not publish every day, and create a piece that's more deep than what I typically did. And that paid off incredibly well with that article. And that basically put me on the map. So that tipping point for me, I guess the real tipping point in writing was when I realized that I could do deeper pieces that could be more useful instead of semi-useful articles that are published every day.
Yeah, it's interesting. It nearly brings me, when I think of writing myself, actually, my biggest advantage when I went back to college, I was really bad at English in school, poetry, and I was good at spelling, but I wasn't really just good at English. It wasn't before. I was good at other subjects I was good at, and I wasn't good at English.
So was that before or after the addiction?
Before the addiction, way before the addiction. It was my weakest thing in skill. So when I went back to college after the addiction, I thought it was going to be my weakest point of writing essays and stuff. But because I had no skills to get rid of, I had no good English. I never wrote. So I started from scratch. It was my biggest advantage because everyone else were breaking down old habits. I had no bad habits. I started from scratch. My skill base started from scratch. And it was my biggest advantage. It's crazy.
I love this. I used to hate that my native language is not English, and I thought I was at a disadvantage. Yeah. But the reason I got popular writing was I'm approachable. My writing is not basic level English, but it's not extremely elevated like some of the writers out there, and so people associate with my language because they can easily read it. They don't have to think about definitions and stuff.
It's good writing for me. That's good writing. That's the best writing.
It's a process, and I think we're born curious. Once our basic needs are met, then curiosity comes into play, and then as soon as we hit the educational system, the curiosity sort of is pushed to the side. As much as teachers try to bring it back, there's too much to quote unquote learn because the institution pushes that, not the individual. The teachers are just the channels, if you will. But it's the institution that sort of pushes it.
So if they weren't pushing for this and we remained curious, we kept our curiosity for our current society, would that work? Because I know, for example, in the Renaissance, that was a very proper approach. It worked really well. In our current society, would that still work? My personal answer is yes, but I don't know.
I definitely think so. I think, it used to be the phrase like, if you know how to read, then you have access to the world. But with assistive technology or the fact that, you've got a smartphone, you don't need to know how to read. If you understand language, it's really just being able to acquire language. And, a good percentage, I don't know what the actual percentage is, but most people that are born can acquire language. So you don't need to know how to read. You don't need to learn your addition tables. But to be able to play in a sandbox and to know that you need water in order for the sand to stick together to build something, that's curiosity. That's trial and error. And I think that that's why there are teenage entrepreneurs out there who aren't going the standard route. I think it's more and more why you're seeing on LinkedIn, the millennials and certainly the Gen Zers are coming out not with college degrees, but they're starting their own businesses because they can. You can build a website now on your own. It may suck, but you can build it. Whereas before you couldn't. 20 years ago, you had to hire somebody to do it. You couldn't. Yeah. It just wasn't. It was not reachable. It's very similar to the printing press. Once the Bible was printed en masse, and you didn't have to learn it in Latin, Pandora's box opened up. You know, it wasn't just
Big time.
it wasn't the elite anymore.
Game changer.
Yeah, it was a game changer, and I think teachers get sucked into, and certainly the educational system gets sucked into. It's an elitist group. It's an elitist position, and it's not. It's not anymore, and they're terrified of it.
Mm-hmm.
So why not embrace it? You know, versus try and fight it.
Yeah, it's hard to think of it in that way. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, I dropped out of university myself, and I've never actually been asked for a diploma. Never.
Right.
It's crazy, isn't it?
It's crazy. It's like Scott Young. He did the computer science thing. He could get hired without actually having went to university at all. Like, why not? He's just as skilled, if not more, because I don't know. I feel like he would be more skilled because people in school study for tests. Not everyone. But I know I was like that. And I was like, well, what's the point? I'm not learning. This is not learning. This is like, I don't know what that is, but it's not stuff that I remembered. So if I don't remember it, if I can't apply it, then it's not considered learning for me.
Agreed.
Anyway, it's 3 p.m., so I didn't want it to be to go much over.
Really enjoyed this chat. It was great.
It was a lot of fun.
Yeah,
it was a lot of fun.
So, guys, thanks for joining in the chat.
Yeah.
And Denise, I'll get back to you after the call. I think I get the emails from people, so thanks for using the skill chart. We're actually working on a new one. It's a prototype right now, so I'm not sure if Ariel is going to let me share it with you, but if not this week, then next week. So I'll share that with you. Get some of your feedback on this. And for people who watched, I hope you got some stuff out of this. I think there's a lot of very different perspectives and ideas, and I personally learned quite a bit from it.
Cool.
All right. Well, thanks for joining, guys. And
cheers, guys. Really, really enjoyed it. Yeah.
Take it easy.
Great chat.